Jonathan, welcome to Adulting with Autism.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be right now than with you, April. I'm pretty glad to be here.
So, for all my squad out there that's totally new to you, tell them who you are.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Domsky. My business is Untangled Coaching. I'm a business and life coach that works with entrepreneurs, especially those on the spectrum, to design environments, strategies, and relationships that actually fit the way that they think, to help them discover what they were born for and thrive.
So, a lot of your clients are neurodivergent,
Yeah,
and you like to call it nerd diverse.
yeah.
What does nerd diverse mean?
So first, I think it's important to note that the vast majority of entrepreneurs are neurodivergent. The statistics are amazing. Between 5 and 8% of people have ADHD, but 50% of entrepreneurs have ADHD. Same numbers between 5 and 8% of the population is dyslexic. Between a third and half of entrepreneurs are dyslexic. Bipolar, 1% of the population is bipolar, 11% of entrepreneurs are bipolar. Somehow there's no data on entrepreneurship and autism, but I'm sure the numbers are very similar. When you think differently, one, you just don't want to work for other people. You want to do stuff your way, but you just see opportunities. When your mind doesn't work on default settings, you see opportunities that other people miss. And that's who I like to work with. It's just people whose minds don't work on default settings. Because when we work, when we try to implement someone else's playbook, it either doesn't work for us or it's just exhausting. And I help people find a way that's true and authentic to them.
Now, you discovered you were autistic at 53.
Yeah.
How did you start connecting the dots before you figured out, oh, yeah, that makes sense?
Well, I didn't connect any dots. And April, if you and I had somehow met a year ago and you had said, "Hey, Jonathan, you ever consider you might be on the spectrum?" I would have said, "Why, no, April. Why do you ask?" But if you had said, well, like, is this the only conversation that you know how to have? Like one on one, deep, talking about things that matter, and do groups stress you out unless they're highly structured? I would have said, yeah. And if you had said, well, do you have sensitivities to sound and light and texture and scent? I'd say, yeah. Like, do you have intense special interests that you just care about more than anyone else that you know and they don't want to hear about it anymore? I'm like, yeah, where are you going with this, April? So I had no idea. And I these traits, I've had them since I was small, of course. But if I had somehow gotten a neuropsych eval when I was 8 years old, the doctor wouldn't have said that I was autistic. They would have just said I was a little quirky because they moved the goalposts. They expanded the definition since you and I were kids. But I'm recently remarried, and I have three wonderful stepchildren who I've come to love. And the youngest one in particular, his name's Eli, just turned 13 yesterday.
No.
And Eli has a lot going on. He's a lot of bad days at school. He's very ADHD, conduct disorder, real impulse control issues. He also has a lot of self awareness. And a little bit before Christmas, he asked his mom, he asked my bride, if she thought that he's autistic. She and I were talking about it that afternoon. And at first, I was dismissive, not because I don't think he's autistic. I don't know if he meets the clinical threshold, but he certainly has strong tendencies. But like he's Eli, we know what his challenges are. Like labels aside, how do we support him? And the conversation continued in that direction. And I was thinking about challenges I had when I was 12. And I told my wife, I'm not neurodiverse, but I've literally known since I was 3 years old that I think differently than other people. And she looks at me and she's like, oh, you're neurodiverse. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's not a word I ever thought about for myself, but fine. I guess I meet the definition. And I said, well, I'm fine. I'm neurodiverse, but I don't have ADHD. I'm not autistic. And she looks at me and she's like, are you sure? I said, well, I'm 100% sure I don't have ADHD. I'm the opposite of that. But we Googled what are the traits of level one autism. And April, I have every single one of them. It was just check, 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 check. So it wasn't just slowly kind of figuring it out. It was just an accidental, I wasn't expecting the conversation to go in that direction, but here we are.
So, for my listeners that are like in their 20s and 30s, what are some signs for them that their life or their work isn't really built for their brain?
Yeah. So the first thing is just asking, does it feel harder than it should be? Um, Life should have a high degree of intense activity. It's called a life of full engagement. Like you should be engaged with something. You should care about something. You should work hard for something. But when you're fully aligned with your core values, with your purpose, with your genius, and just how your mind is wired, it should feel effortless. Again, even if you have that high degree of intense activity. But when you're doing the stuff that everybody tells you to do on the podcasts and the business books and videos and all that sort of stuff, and you just come home from work exhausted, feeling like you need to relax with a beer or three or just flop in front of the TV for 3 hours, that's a sign that maybe something's misaligned.
So how they can what can they do? Like, how do they get started with switching? Because I know a lot of 'em we don't like transition, Jonathan. We just don't like change.
Yeah.
So
Well, so the first step, and all of this is easier with the guide, but everybody could do it by themselves. It's first just to pay attention and notice what is something in your life that you've learned to accept that you would have never consciously chosen. And just with a little bit of design, with a little bit of intention, almost always these challenges, we can gracefully sidestep them, we can transcend them, or we can design those environments, the strategies, those relationships to actually fit the way that that we think. And I'll give two examples if I could. So I was working with a client. He's a really good business coach. He's exceptional with strategy, figuring out possibilities, stuff like that. He's okay at running the meetings. And he was hired for a 2-day to run a company's 2-day offsite to, do their annual planning. And he was fired after the first day, which is it's very rare. And it was very embarrassing. He was upset. So the first step, just notice, like, what's something that happens that you don't like? And that's a pretty loud example of something that he doesn't like. And he asked the entrepreneur who hired him, like, what happened? Because he thought he crushed it the first day. And she told him the entire day, I was signaling to you I wanted to go in a different direction. You were totally ignoring me. Now, of course, he wasn't ignoring her. He has trouble noticing social cues. It was just oblivious to it. And he's like, gentlemen, what do I do about this? And I told him, you don't have to learn how to be great at social cues. Like that's really hard to learn. Like, I mean, it's possible, but it's hard. You either have it or you don't. But again, with just a little bit of design, we could gracefully sidestep that. What if you started with a little bit of disclosure and you said, April, I'm really looking forward to our 2-day offsite. Just want to let you know when I'm dialed in, I'm totally focused on the agenda. Sometimes I miss stuff that's happening around me. Here's a bell. If I'm not going the direction you want, just ring it. We're going to stop. We're going to do whatever you want. And it's right there in the agenda. Every hour I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask you if, this is what you're expecting. This is what you want. He doesn't need to learn how to notice social cues. He just has to notice that he's a problem with it and then design around it. Follow the agenda. If I give just one more example, my entire life, I've had a small group of, close friends, and it took me a long time to make new ones. And until about 5 years ago, when I learned how to effortlessly, authentically make, friends, and now I have over 150 people who I would consider to be close friends. I know it's over 150 because I keep them all on a list, of course, just like everybody does. I mean, how else would I know to keep in touch with them otherwise? But I didn't get that way by being like my magnetically charismatic, holistic friends. I got that way by deeply being myself. When I meet someone who I think, oh, that person's kind of interesting, um, you and I had that experience. I saw you on LinkedIn. I'm like, huh, April, she seems like she's doing some real good in the world. And I reached out to you and I said, I'd love to hear your story. And I'd love to tell you mine. And you were gracious enough to accept a Zoom call. I told you my story. You told me you told me yours, and now we're friends. And then 2 to 12 times a year, I look at my list, I call up my friends, and that's it. And that's really all it took. Instead of being in a crowded room or a bar, trying to get to know people, which I never would, I peel them off into the hallway where it's quiet, or we do a one-on-one on Zoom like this. It's just about designing your relationships, your environment, and your strategies to fit the way you think, starting with noticing this is something in my life that's not working.
okay. So because I know a lot of my young people are like, "Now listen here, w we're wandering in this world trying to figure out adulting and shifting, and now you tell us we don't have to learn social cues? How do they do how do they, like how do you build that environment so they are, like, purposeful, but not, throat punch in your face? This is how it's gonna be.
Sure. So first, it's important. It's a really important question. And I want to make an important distinction. So most of the people I work with are entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs have a high degree of agency over their lives. If an entrepreneur doesn't like the people that they're working with, they could just say, well, let's take a look at who hired all these idiots and let's make some changes. If an entrepreneur decides they want to take Wednesday afternoons off so that they could coach their kids' little league game, then the only challenge is how to organize a workflow and then decide, communicate that and make that happen. It's a lot harder to do those things if you work in a corporate environment. Good luck telling your boss, "The team's not working for me. I would like a new team, please." That's not gonna happen. So I'm very aware of the privileged position that the people I work with are just the agency that they have in their lives. But when you work on your weaknesses, you tend to have strong weaknesses, but they're still weaknesses. When you design around your strengths, that's where we're really able to thrive. So for someone in your 20s and 30s, if you're not already an entrepreneur, and it's not for everybody, but it could be a really wonderful life, especially because of that time freedom and that choice that you could have over these things. But if you're working with someone else, then yeah, there's certain adjustments that need to be made. The question I would ask myself before you spend all this time masking or, you know, just working really hard on things that just don't come naturally to you. Question I ask myself is, if I really loved myself, would I do this thing? And sometimes the answer is yes. If I'm with a group of friends and they want to go out to a noisy, crowded restaurant, which is not an environment where I thrive, um, often I'll say like, yeah, I'll come because I value those friendships. And, I might have a one-on-one conversation with the person sitting next to me for most of the evening. But it's worth it to me to be able to be with my friends, to be in an environment that isn't particularly comfortable for me. But if that same group of friends tells me that they're going to an amusement park where this totally
Right,
total
yeah.
sensory overload, like I'll meet you guys for dinner afterwards once you're done. Um, so pick your battles. But one more thing I'll say: there's certain elements of your life that are difficult to change today. Almost everything in your life can be changed a year from now if you take the steps to do it.
Now you focus on, well, mostly entrepreneurs, which is awesome because most of my kids out there, and I call them kids because, I'm old.
Yeah. You're a mother to the world. Yeah.
Right. Mother to the world, auntie to
Yeah.
the world, that they probably never thought of being an entrepreneur because it was never told to them that, hey, that might be your jam.
Yeah.
How would you take somebody who came to you and said, I work in this corporate or office and it's not working? How do I jump out to be an entrepreneur and not
Sure.
tear my hair out?
Yeah. So there's two places I would start. The first is getting really clear on your purpose. And there's lots of definitions of purpose, but the one that I like best, and I like it because it's just such a useful tool to living your life, is your purpose or your why. It's the intersection of what you feel, how you feel compelled to show up in the world and contribute, because that's who you are, with the impact that you seek to make the world the way that it should be. My purpose is to untangle the clutter, obscuring our best, most authentic selves. That's my contribution. And I do it on podcasts like this. I do it with my kids. I do it with my friends. I don't know how to turn this off, right? April, this is the only way I know how to do this. And why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone want to untangle the clutter, obscuring our best, most authentic selves so that we have a life in business that feels effortless, meaningful, and joyous? Because so says me, those are the measures of success most worth having in life. So once you're really clear on your purpose, the next step is, well, what's your genius? What are the things that you just effortlessly do that create abundance for yourself and those around you? And the difference between excellence and genius is, so I'm really great at data analysis. I could, there's little that I can't do in Excel. But if I'm staring at a spreadsheet for 4 hours, my eyes glaze over, April, and I need to take a nap. But what we're doing right now, like I could do this back to back to back all day. Talking about genius, talking about, purpose, talking about how to untangle the clutter, obscuring our best, most authentic selves. That's the difference between excellence and genius. Excellence is something that you do. Genius is something that you are. And once you've discovered those two things, your why and your genius, the next step is to ask, what are the skills? What are the abilities that power my genius activities? And then how can I leverage those genius skills in service of my purpose? What can I devote my life to that leverages my genius in service of my purpose? Especially for talented people with a lot of resources. It's really hard to say, April, here's a blank piece of paper. Let your imagination run wild. What do you want to do with your life? It's too big a question. We can't.
Right. I was like,
There's a
well,
lot of things that you're good at, right? But with this narrow focus, what could I joyfully devote my life to that leverages my genius in service of my purpose? It's easy to brainstorm 2, 3, 5 things, any of which sounds awesome. And then there's a separate process to choose the one. But what you were born to do, God's plan for you, whatever you want to call it, what we're born to do is leveraging our genius in service of our purpose. And then with just a little bit of entrepreneurial energy and putting a plan together, it's usually pretty easy to turn that into a business plan.
now you mentioned that communication habits can clarify understanding and relationships around you. What tends to get in the way of that for a lot of autistic and ADHD people?
So can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood it.
Oh, like what tends to get in the way for autistic and ADHD people when they're trying to cultivate relationships and
Yeah,
be understanding and clear?
sure. So 15 years ago, 17 years ago, I did a 360 review. A 360 review in businesses when you ask all the people around you just what they think of you and what it's like to work with you. You ask your boss, you ask the people who report to you, you ask your colleagues. And I got this report back. I was working with a coach at the time. And I'm like, that's not right. Clearly, all these people do not think that way about me because that's so different from my intention. People around me said that I was aloof, or that they thought I didn't care about them, or that I was just too focused on the goal instead of on what they needed. And yeah, I told my coach, like, this is wrong because I care deeply about the people who I work with. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, can you take responsibility for the way that other people perceive you? Can you take responsibility for the way that other people perceive you? And it was a really important question. And the answer is yes. Back to my story about my client who misses social cues. Um, so I have a mind that is drawn to inconsistencies, that is drawn to areas for improvement. And while it's an incredibly useful skill, especially in business, how can we improve things? April, if you had a mustard stain on your collar, I would not say, April, great job on keeping 99% of your shirt clean. Like, I'd say, April, you have a mustard stain on your shirt. Like, it's like, do something about that, right? But with working with staff, when they work a whole month on a project and it's 99% great, and I spent 10 seconds saying, oh, this is good, and totally boring. The part that works is boring. It works. There's nothing to talk about. Let's talk about that mustard stain. It's incredibly demotivating and people don't like it. And they tend to think that you don't care about them. So that was when I came to this realization, I had enough self-awareness, partly through the help of my coach and the 360 review. I had enough self-awareness to know that I did these things, but I didn't have enough self-awareness to actually do anything about it in real time. But what I was able to do was design my relationships, design my environments, design my strategies to fit the way that I think. So I did a few things. I So my company, we had processes for everything. SOPs, standard operating procedures. Some of my friends tease me that my love language is SOPs. Like whenever there's a process, they're like, we need to document this. We need to talk about what the best way to do things is. And I made a working with Jonathan SOP. And I wrote down all the things that I do that I thought people misinterpreted. People that, things that if they want to get the most out of their relationship with me, they need to, they need to be aware of this stuff. I would build into my agendas. I'd have quarterly reviews with all my staff members. The last item on the agenda was for me to tell them why I was happy they were in the company because I wouldn't just naturally do it, but I could follow an agenda. Like that's easy. We would have company lunch meetings every 2 weeks. Uh, I hate parties. I'm not a social person in that sense, but I delegated to a very social administrative assistant. Like I want to know everybody's birthday, I want to know everybody's work anniversary, cater company lunches every 2 weeks, and I'll come in at the end for a company meeting, and we'll sing happy birthday, and I'll give a speech on everybody's work anniversary, telling them why I'm so happy they're part of the company. I built it into the agenda. Um, One just funny story about the working with Jonathan SOP. So in October, I was leading a workshop for a group of entrepreneurs, one of whom happened to be autistic, and she told me, "Business is easy, relationships are hard." And she was a very attractive, very funny, autistic entrepreneur. And she'd been married for a while. She'd been divorced for about 3 years. And she told me that it's just really hard for her. It's easy for her to get a first date, often a second, really hard for her to get a third date. She just does stuff that puts people off. And I told her the story about the working with Jonathan SOP. And I don't want to say her name, but I said, what about a loving April SOP? And I reached out to her about a month ago. She just moved into with her boyfriend. She wrote a loving April SOP. She gave it to I mean, there's a little luck involved too, I'm sure. She found the right person. But she told the person, like, who wouldn't like an instruction manual for their boss or for their spouse? Give it to them. Tell them what the way that you tick and be patient. So that's some of the advice I'd have. Take responsibility and tell people what they need in order to have a relationship with you.
Now, building on that, how do they stop focusing themselves into boxes that really weren't meant for them? Even though, they may have this talent and they've heard all their lives, oh, you would be a great engineer. You would be a great scientist,
Yeah,
but not, you know, something they love, like theater, because nobody ever thinks that autistic people want to do
sure.
theater. So how do they do it?
So first, I just want to say, this last few months, I probably reached out to about 100 autistic entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, and we defy categorization. I mean, certainly I've met engineers and, IT people. I've also met artists and, I met a corporate rapper. He goes into companies, annual meetings and he'll make up a rap for them, like as part of their, as part of their thing. You know, Actors, artists, creative people of all sorts. There is no box, but just because you're good at something, even if you're great at something, it doesn't mean that that's what you need to do for a living. Maybe that's a hobby. Um, so the first thing I would say is try things. And just a very simple way to illustrate it, let me just ask you, April, do you have a favorite food? Do something that you really like to eat?
Rice.
You really like to eat rice. How did you learn that you like rice?
My mother made it and I ate it.
Yeah, your mother, you tried it when you were a kid, and you're like, oh, rice is delicious. I'm a rice person. The way to develop passion in yourself and a child is just to try things and then notice when you light up and say, like, oh, wow, like, who knew that I like improvisational theater? I've never tried that before. Who knew that I like accounting? Whatever it is, notice it, name it, celebrate it, and then foster it without um, without a particular end in mind. So my son, he's 17 now, but when he was 7, out of the blue, he said he wanted to learn electric guitar. And he doesn't know anyone who plays electric guitar. I mean, he didn't at the time. We didn't listen to a lot of rock music. I'm more of a classical jazz kind of guy. But I like to start with the S, so I gave him lessons. And he was 7 years old, and it was summer, and he liked the lessons enough, but he would never practice. And it was always a struggle getting into the lessons because there was no play date worth ending to go inside to play guitar. But after a couple months, we live a few blocks from the beach in Lake Michigan, and he had a lesson, and I got there like 20 minutes early so I could peel him off the beach because I knew it was gonna be a struggle. But that day, as soon as he sees me, he tells his friend, he says, "Arthur, I need to go." And we were on the it was just a 2-minute drive, but we were, driving to his guitar lesson, and I'm like, "That's different. Like, what happened? Like, usually I have to, pull you off the beach." And he said, "I think guitar is my destiny, and I don't wanna mess it up." So, okay, like, he's a musician. I noticed it. I named it. I celebrated it. That weekend, I spent 8 joyful hours. I looked at the Billboard 100 every year from 1955 until this time it was 2016. And I made a list of the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 songs on the Billboard 100 each year that either I liked or I thought he would like or that were historically important. And the next 4 months, I gave him a rock and roll music education. We'd listen to the songs, we'd watch the performances, we could find them on YouTube. It was a way of celebrating his love of music. I've never told him to practice guitar, and he plays every day. And that's how you do it. Try things, notice it, name it, celebrate it, foster it without any attachment to the result. And then if it's something that you think you might want to do, um, talk to an entrepreneur or a coach like me and try to make a business plan around it. You can make a business out of anything.
I tell my son that. I'm like, if you love it, you can make money at it.
Yeah.
So, how do they pivot to another career without, because, some of them are like, we're just going to burn it all down and just
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Well, it depends on your age and your responsibilities. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24 years old. So, there wasn't a lot to burn down. It was just, didn't have, I was married, but my, my wife was my partner in the business. And I think our rent was like $700 a month or something like that, living in this
I was
shoebox
like,
of an apartment.
crazy.
Yeah. Like we didn't, we didn't have kids, like we didn't have any responsibilities. So yeah, when you're 24, sure, write them all down. And that's a great incentive to, to work hard and to, to make it work. But, if you have a mortgage, if you have responsibilities, if you have obligations, unless you're lucky enough to have someone who supports you, financially, uh, it could be irresponsible to just burn it all down. But the way that most people do it is they, start it as a side gig. They do it nights, they do it weekends until it gets a little bit of traction. And then when they're ready, they leave their jobs. I would say this though, there is, if you wait until you're ready, you will never start. The job description of an entrepreneur is to figure it out. All my friends are entrepreneurs, April. Um, None of us would have been hired to do our jobs when we started our companies. I mean, we just like when I was 24, what did I know? Who would have hired me to start a business? It's absurd. But life's a curriculum perfectly designed to work out God's plan for you. Life's a curriculum perfectly designed to work out your purpose. Just look around, notice what needs to be done, and ask, who is it that I need to be? What is it I need to learn? What's the action I need to take? Um, you know, Definitely wait until, again, if you have responsibilities, if you have obligations, you don't want to be irresponsible. Wait until it has some legs. But yeah, if you wait until you know everything, if you wait until you could replace 100% of your income, you're probably never going to start.
So, how do they personally decide when something needs tweaking at their job
Mhm.
versus, yeah, I got to go?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions. It's something that nobody teaches you until now. I'm going to tell you. So in school, we're taught to use analytical logic to solve problems, and it's a really powerful tool to build a bridge or to make a business plan, to solve a math problem. But everything that makes life worth living looks stupid through an analytical lens. Let me say that once more. Everything that makes life worth living looks stupid through an analytical lens. I mentioned my son and my stepkids. I love being a father. It's one of the just best, most joyful things I've ever done. I tease my son all the time that he's the worst investment I'll ever make. I have spent thousands of hours just making this child laugh. I and who knows how much money I've spent on enrichment activities and travel and like programs and education. I will never get that time and money back. Why would anyone watch a sunset? I can't imagine a less efficient, productive activity. Or if you are going to watch a sunset, why don't you record it and play it twice as fast so that it's faster? Like these statements sound ridiculous because they are. It's analytical logic. It's the wrong tool. Everything that makes life worth living looks stupid through an analytical lens. And this question that you asked, should I stay or should I go? Should I, should I show up to that dinner? Should I, should I stay at home? Reason, you'll never think your way to the answer. You can only feel your way to the answer, which does not mean that it's just subjective and make it up. It's, we need heart-centered tools. Um, so here's how I coach people to make important decisions. First, start with your brain and analytical logic and brainstorm a list. What are the options here? And in this example, should I start my own business? Should I just quit and figure it out? Should I stay where should I grow where I'm planted and, just figure out a way to make it work? So these are our three choices, right? State your core values one at a time and ask, given these three choices, our core values are how our life should be lived. Given these three choices, which is the fullest, most satisfying expression of my first core value? And put a little check mark next to it. Set your second core value and third on down the list. Which of these choices for each value is the fullest, most satisfying expression of my value? Then state your purpose. Which of these options is the fullest, most satisfying expression of my purpose? And then my favorite, April, is there someone in this world who you just love unconditionally? Someone who you just have just the highest quality of love for? Someone comes to mind?
My kid.
Yeah. What's the name?
His name is Azari, but he likes to go by the letter Z.
Z. So if I had loved myself with the same quality of love that I had for Z, what would I tell myself to do? Put a little check mark. Done this exercise with clients hundreds of times. There's always a cluster of check marks next to one of the choices, sometimes two. And then it's just obvious what the right choice is because this is the fullest, most satisfying expression of who you are as a human being. And there's no room for guilt. There's no room for doubt. This is what you were born to do. And then it's just a question of how to get.
What do you wish autistic and Audi ADHD young adults were told about leadership and ambition that you didn't really hear till late in life?
Yeah. So, and this is true about leadership. This is true about ambition. This is true about any desirable thing in life. The traits that make you different, the traits that um, make things challenging, especially when you're young. And the reason what that makes it so challenging is that you're in an environment that wasn't built for you. Like there's, I mentioned earlier that, most entrepreneurs are neurodivergent. Let's just take dyslexia. I know you didn't ask about dyslexia, but it's the same as any of these neurodivergent traits. There's no way getting around it. If you're 8 years old and you're dyslexic and the teacher says, okay, class, now we're going to take turns reading aloud, that's just hard. Like it's a bad environment and there's no getting around it. It's an affliction. But 1/3 of millionaires have dyslexia because that same trait that makes it hard to read, that same brain structure that makes it hard to read, makes it really easy to find connections between things. It's a really useful skill in business. People who are dyslexic, they make connections. They see things three-dimensionally. Uh, those are really important business traits. All of these traits, whether it's this conversation that we're having right now, one-on-one, I thrive on that. I have a deep presence. I'm a great listener when it comes to one-on-one groups. They stress me out unless they're highly structured. So let's plan leadership. Let's plan a business around having lots of one-on-one time and not having lots of free-form group discussions. My special interest is personal growth. And in school or with my friends, sometimes they get a little tired of hearing about it. But April, this is what I do for a living. Like people pay me to, share the wisdom that I've acquired over the decades and I've distilled into these easy to understand, simple to follow processes. And all these things we were talking about, find your genius, find your core values, find your purpose, discover what it is that you were born for. Each of these is a 1 to 2 hour process that I lead people through. And it's just a natural extension of who I am. And when I was in college, one of my friends was a statistician. He was a statistics major. He loved statistics. He would talk about statistics
Cool.
all the time. And he was this huge hockey fan. Like only two things that matter in life, hockey and statistics. And he became the lead statistician for the NHL, um, the National Hockey League. I mean, this is like, what an incredible job. I get to talk about statistics and hockey all day. Um, all these traits, especially the ones that got you into trouble when you were growing up, they're not negative. They're contextual. In the wrong context, it's an affliction. When properly channeled and properly harnessed, when you design your environment, you design your strategies, you design your relationships, it's a gift. And I love the way that I think. I wouldn't give it up for anything. Did it make it a little harder when I was a kid? Yeah, absolutely. But I've designed my career, designed my relationships to support me and how I think instead of working against myself. So what I tell people who want to know about authority and leadership and what that means for being neurodivergent, yes, read the books. They're good playbooks, but ask yourself, does this actually fit who I am, or do I need to adjust it to actually fit the way that I'm wired?
Okay. So, where can people find you if they want to take your coaching or if they have more questions? Because I'm sure there's somebody out there. I'm always missing a question.
So I'm of course going to answer that question in a second. But there's just one more thing I want to add. You, you, your company doesn't need you to be well-rounded. Your company needs your team to be well-rounded. I have so many, half of entrepreneurs have ADHD. They're all really good at starting something. Not all of them are good at running something. Not all of them are good at finishing something. But if they have a partner who's a great operator, if they have a partner who's great at finishing things, they could be the visionary idea guy to get things going. And then their partner could do the stuff that they hate. It's not about you being balanced, it's about your team being balanced. Anyway, thank you. How can people find me? The easiest way is my website, www.untangled-coaching.com. Don't forget the dash. Or find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Jonathan Domsky, Domsky. I'm the only one.
Okay. Final question. What does adulting with autism mean for you?
Adulting with autism mean to me? Adulting with autism to me means just fully being my authentic self in a way that helps me thrive, not pretending to be someone else. That's what a child's forced to do. But early on in this journey, um, I told you I was remarried, and I moved into my wife's neighborhood, and we were invited to a couple New Year's parties, and she canceled them. She declined. And I asked her, "Well, like, why did you cancel the parties?" And she's like, "Well, you don't like parties." And I said, "Well, I wasn't expecting to have a good time. I wanna meet my neighbors. I wanna, be a part of this community." And part of being an adult is taking responsibility, communicating these things. And the solution that we came up with was always make it easy for me to decline a party, please, but don't take away my agency. Leave that decision to me whether I wanna go or not. Just to have those conversations with as many people and on as many topics as you need so that you could fully thrive being you and not pretending to be someone else or letting someone else take away your power.
Jonathan, thank you so much for coming onto my podcast.
It was fun, April. Um, I love the good that you do in the world.